Hey, that even looks like my basement dark now. The reason I have to wear the hat is because I learned on my first two of them, when I bareheaded bent down, it flared out. So I'm not going to powder my head.
Is it recording now or just multiple?
It looks to be.
You got a timer or anything going?
Ooh. Yeah, it's recording. Cool. All right. So, welcome to the Curmudgeon in the Cellar. Usually I spend my time on there answering questions and comments from previous ones, so we'll just go live today. And, it's just my head only. Come on. That's better. Okay. Shoot. All I do on my channel is run off at the head, following comments. I tell stories and answer about, how we did crap in the old days. And make my snarky comments on stupid stuff that's going on social media that week concerning gaming. I don't get political, I don't get religious, just snarky and sarcastic on occasion. So, who's first? What do you want to know? What do you want answered? I don't criticize other people's games. If you want to play another edition, that's fine. I don't waste my time criticizing the edition wars or the clone wars or any of that crap. My whole philosophy since I started playing board games in 6th grade in 1961 was I was doing it to have fun. And if you're not having fun, you're doing something wrong. So I talk about board games on my channel. There's a board game right now. My God, I've already spent how much? 88 and 57. Oh, goodness. Good thing I sold some stuff. Called Scythe. S-C-Y-T-H-E. I suck at that game. And I can't give it up. I got the digital version because my buddies did. And I thought, oh, God, they'll really kill me if I don't, keep going. What intrigues me about a game is the mechanical structure. In that I mean in Scythe, there are 5 groups of people that each have their own weaknesses and drawbacks. And then there's 5 boards that pertain to construction. So everything's random. You can play it 100 times and never come up with the same combinations of you and your 3 buddies or 4 buddies. And it's so simple in its presentation and so subtle in the machinations you have. You could be cruising along pretty sure you're doing great, and all of a sudden, bing, bing, boom, boom, you came in 3rd place. It's got those, and it's not fluky stuff. You don't have, you can backstab. I mean, what good's a game that you can't backstab your buddy with? But it's just so complex in its nuances, and yet so bafflingly simple in its mechanics. I'm fascinated by it. And we'll probably be playing it until after the first of the year. And my group, 3-4 weeks, and we're looking for something just to break the monotony. This thing, it's been every other week for the last 2.5-3 months. And we'll continue that way at least through January. And I talk about stuff like that, I saw, if it was a game that I creamed everybody with, well, big deal, I'd go out and buy it so I could cream my friends. No. I went out and spent so far I'll probably spend $300 before it's all over on all the expansions and crap on a game that I suck at. Because I'm 70 in 2 months. I'm probably not going to make another big game purchase. Right? I mean, that's gambling and foolishness. Having already dodged one huge bullet, I don't care to risk any more. So I talk about silliness in rules. Why did you complicate that? Make it easy. Don't sweat the small stuff. When I come to run this new type of game I'm running, I gave up on my TPK and stuff when I had my surgery and everything, the chemo. Decided, while it was always fun for me to kill 8 people at a time, and they always seem to laugh about it, wouldn't it be fun if we were all alive left at the end? And the only problem was our sides hurt from laughing, and that's what this new thing I do. I've done it 11, 12 times now, never runs 4 hours, hardly ever runs 3. Nobody feels like they're cheated. And we're the ones that are over in the corner laughing all the time, breaking up the rest of the, not trying to, but we're having fun. And that's what I do now. I play games to have fun. I love running old school games. I give them pre-gens. Here it is. It's a typical brutal railroad game of the worst kind. You got to solve one puzzle before you can go on to the next. That's why I call it the wheel of blame. And the blame part comes in at the end because I do this thing where everybody gets a index card. And on it they give me 2 things. And I collect all those index cards. I look through them. And I start, and the adventure starts right there, and I work in everything on those cards, usually both things on the cards at the same time. Yesterday I had a rarity. I had 2 people give the same thing on the card, so I combined the 2 of those, and we had a really slap bang encounter. Hardly anybody ever dies now. Don't care. I give universal antidotes out like they're aspirins. Universal antidote fixes everything. Put your 2 halves of your body back together like crazy glue. I'm just in the fun, and I advise people that if you're getting all serious about this, you're doing something wrong. If you go home after a game session pissed off at other players or the DM, now you can go home pissed off that the rock fell on you. That stuff happens, and okay, they rolled an 8-sider and you were number 4 and the rock fell on you. But if you in other cases, then you're not doing it right. If you're playing with people that annoy you, find another group. Start another group. After 46 years of marriage, my wife came home one day and said, "Would you make a game for me and my friends from the Zumba class?" And after she revived me with a smelling salts, I said, "My dear, I've been waiting 46 years for you to ask me that question." And so I took a bunch of people that knew nothing about role-playing except something they'd heard several years ago in college, or one day they dropped in on something or whatever. A real simple scenario, something they could all relate to. My wife said, yeah, 45 minutes. At 2 hours, I pointed at the watch. And we finished at 10 minutes to 4, almost 4 hours long. Everybody had a good time. Very simple. I explained the six stats, right? The stats that we all live with. Strength, intelligence. Strength. That's how big a rock you can pick up. Dexterity. That's how far away you can hit something with a rock. Just real simple stuff. And off we went. I had 8 newbies down the trail on the path of the bugbears who'd stolen their relic inside of 10 minutes. I said, all the other numbers there, I'll explain them to you as we go. And they were enthusiastic about it. I tailored it to them. I made them from this semi-religious order of females who were all about super nutrition and fitness. And they all had 5-foot staffs with which you do not want to fool. Because they may have been a walking stick, but that was their weapon. And so they all immediately saw themselves as fit Zumba persons, and badass, And so they willingly got into it. The whole map was on a sheet of one of those half sheets of paper. The whole map, I just drew a line for the road and where the crossroads were. And I had pixies that assail them and steal all their food. So then they had to go into that lovely orchard and find all the weird stuff that grew in there. And then a little later, they were confronted by a pack of dogs. And then my wife, of all people, after they found out they had no food and that the lovely food in the orchard wouldn't stay lovely if you moved out of the orchard, they were talking about food, and my wife comes up with, well, let's cook the dogs. Cheryl? So I immediately put the skewers, and you cut them open, you just find they're filled with worms and maggots. They're all diseased. But here's my lovely wife of 46 years who's fed me all these years and our children, willing to cook wild dogs on the path. Shows you what role-playing can bring out. All the best. So people ask all the time, how do I get some new people involved? Whoops, sorry for you watching this. How do I get some new people involved? The easiest way possible. Make it relatable. Don't overwhelm them with numbers. I tell you know, they all had, I think all they had was a 20-sided die. You know, everybody had one. And a piece of paper and this real half-sheet character sheet and a pencil. And that was it. And we played for 4 hours. They all told me they had a great time. Shortly after that, I had my surgery, and several of them brought me over lovely meals and pies and stuff afterwards, so they must not have hated it. And I found out that 2 of them that moved away have, in contact with this network of Zumba ladies, 2 of them have actually made overtures to find other groups and see if they were as interesting. And I told them all, I said, not everybody plays like I do. You may find something you like better. You may find a group you don't care for. Well, don't quit. Find a group you feel comfortable with. And that's been my mantra since I came back into the industry in 2006. You know, find something you're comfortable with, have a good time. My beliefs are the fewer rules, the better. Rulings, not rules. You know, play by the seat of your pants. Anybody that's played in these games that I'm running now, you know you spend a lot of time rolling a 20. Because that's what we used to do. Got an idea? Roll a 20. We'll see how preposterous it was. You know? And when they roll a 1, they know it was not a good idea. And we used to let the dice take the course of the game. You know, just rolling 20s. Got this idea you're going to pole vault over the chasm and stuff like that? Fine. And we brought decks in. You know, roll your decks or less. That way a good dex is great, but there's always a 19 or 20. When the pole slipped or the pole cracked or whatever. And people today are going, oh, that's too much element of chance. Well, yeah, great rewards should require great risk. And the people that go, I couldn't. I've actually read of a campaign where they all sat down before it started and agreed that nobody would die. My next question was, well, why'd you go next week? What was the point? Social? Well, have a beer at the bar. You know? But nobody would die. That's the product of the bad stuff that the wizards did for a while. The wizards. And it's also the generation that we have that everybody got a trophy. I used to be a soccer coach back in the early 80s. And there was 2 trophies at the end of the year, gold and silver. And either team that won either one didn't care if theirs was silver and the other was gold or vice versa. In fact, as often the girls with the gold ones said the silver was prettier. They didn't care, that was just a trophy. And now I hear that you get a trophy for showing up. You get a trophy for being there. Whoops, what'd that say? Uh-oh. Anyway, it's part of it. I think we need to teach the new generation that we're there to have fun and to let things roll as they might. We had a discussion today after one of my games about, because all these people were new to old school playing, all but one, and because he's played my games before. And they were saying, so this old school really is about the story. And I go, well, yeah, and particularly in what I'm doing now, I'm spinning these elements into a story. I said, but a real one is a big sandbox with the framework and structure of a story, and then you tell me where you're going to go, and you start writing the chapters and the paragraphs and stuff as we go. And that's the best campaign, where we write and create the tale. And I'm just there to nudge you from a bad decision. You know, the old school was, now tell me again exactly what you were going to do. When you heard that, you immediately rethought your plan. Because I'm giving you a chance to be unstupid. and I've talked to several old schoolers, and they all had a phrase or a question much like that everybody realized, oh, I better look for another flaw I haven't found yet. And that's why I like old school, loosey-goosey. Now, I play board games by the rules. Absolutely. Why are they there otherwise? I play miniatures by the rules. But I'm also old school enough that if we come up in the middle of a miniatures game and we can't find an exact rule, I'm more than happy to make a decision and go on. I'm not going to stop the game until we get a ruling. That's part of the old school that I admire. And back in the day when we were playing miniatures, you needed at least 3 people. One had to be the judge or the referee, and the other 2 were the players. Nobody wanted to be the judge. You weren't playing, you know? And so D&D took a different kind of judge and made him there. And I wrote rules before I left TSR that took the judge out of micro armor rules. I wrote pages and pages of tables of possible configurations of Soviet and Nazi forces on the Eastern Front in the last 6 months of the war, after spending about 15 months of research. And you could get a very, I'd say 18 times out of 20, you could get a very representative battle you can make up, you know, right there on the spot. Because we used to just like to have, we didn't refight real battles. We just like to, how many tanks you got? Okay. Line them up on the other side of the sand table and just go at it, hammer and tongs. You know, it's the fun of the measurement and the firing and the rolling and missing. And I used to have little periscopes that fit behind a micro armor tank, and if you could see it through the periscope, you could shoot at it. And if you couldn't, you couldn't. And that's why you had a sand table, because it wasn't this. You know, you could go hull down and be not seen. That's a level of realism that I like. So I'm very nitty gritty in miniatures rules, but not afraid to make a ruling and go on. You know, days only last 24 hours. Let's go on. Why get hung up on something? One time I had a gentleman at Gamehole Con challenge me. He was playing in my D&D game and told me I couldn't do that. I wasn't sure I heard him right. And a couple of minutes later, I heard him mutter again, "You can't do that." And so I asked him, "Excuse me?" "Well, you can't do that. Why did?" And so I don't even remember what it was. It ended up with, well, as it happens, young man, and I offered him a ticket into another game, a refund, you know, all the nice customer service things. And finally, I told him, I said, "Look, I know it's that way because I wrote the damn rule you're talking about. Would you please leave now?" It's the only time I've ever had to do that. And the whole table, I've sat there, holding it in, holding it in, holding it in. And then somebody let it out, probably a 3.5 player. The table erupted in laughter, and we went on with the game. But I do it that way because it's my way, and you should be, as a DM, just as high-handed. It's your game. You can let them write the chapters, but don't let them pervert and destroy the framework or the outline that you had. If you get a player that's just persistently obstreperous, blue bold him. That was Gary's thing he taught me before he went to work there. Because occasionally he'd get somebody come up to play on the weekend and they were a jerk and they just get hit with a blue bolt and they were frozen in place for the rest of the day. So they didn't play anymore. And he said he only threw 2 or 3 and that's all he ever had to throw. But it's, you know, if somebody's ruining your world and they're ruining it for everybody else and you see your other people reacting the same way, toss them. A good role-playing group should be compatible friends. Compatible friends can argue with each other. You know, they can disagree and still remain friends, as long as you stay away from religion and politics. You can remain friends. You shouldn't have somebody that's always annoying you. As a DM, you can fudge a little bit, make his life a little harder. And when he complains, well, must be kismet or karma or something. And, right? Fudging. Oh, what a horrible subject, fudging dice rolls. Any DM that says he never fudged a die roll is not telling you the truth. Most of us should have Pinocchio noses out the glass windows in the other side of the hall if we say we never fudged a die roll. I fudge them all the time. I can honestly say never against a character. But hey, something's going on and you just don't really want to see it end now, and you rolled an 11 and you needed a 12. Oh man, you made it. Of course, you want the fun to continue. That's why we're all here. We're having fun. Yeah, sometimes people die, and yeah, it's hard. But in the old days, we didn't have just one character. We had a stable because we paid attention to recuperation, and we paid attention to where you were on the landmass. And so Rob Kuntz had come through on a Tuesday afternoon and go, I'm going to run over and wherever this evening. Who wants to play? And so, okay, my one guy's over on the other side, and my other guy's still recuperating from the last adventure, but I got 2 or 3 more in the stable. So I just pull another guy out, and off we go, and we play. And that's how you ended up, in old school terms, having 6, 7 players, all at 7th or 8th level, if they were lucky enough, long enough. And those 6 or 7 players probably took 11 or 12 altogether to get there. But you didn't do stupid things, you took somebody else. Or you took the guy that was better suited for that adventure or whatever. And you didn't have all your emotional worth invested in a 2-dimensional piece of paper and go into a clinical depression because he was stupid enough to run in and challenge the dragon. And I have seen people go into a certified clinical depression over a character death. I've seen a marriage and an engagement break over character activities. Lighten up. This is supposed to be fun, not an alter ego. You know, we're not slipping into another dimension, becoming Doctor Strange. You know, this is supposed to be fun. And if you aren't having fun, I believe, go find something else to do. Play pool, play cards, play darts, play poker, play pinball. I play all those things. So keep them all fun. Questions, come on.
Yeah. After you started with TSR and like D&D was taken off.
Yeah.
When did you realize you really had onto something? Was there a certain moment that it
Well, in
kicked
late 77 or early 78, and I can't remember, but I remember that time in the growth spurt and everything, Gary and I had one of our, by then, very rare blue sky sessions. We both had an hour off at the end of the day to go lock ourselves in. First it was his study, then it was his office. And just sit and have some really bad scotch and some really awful cigars with plastic tips and just yarn, blue sky as we called it, just yarn. The first ones are like, yeah, someday we'll have a print run of 5,000. We'd laugh ourselves silly. Before long, we were printing 7,000 at a time. About that time, we realized probably the most profound thing that we had done, not hiding, there I am hiding. The most profound thing that we had done is we had created a language, a new Esperanto for nerds and geeks, as we considered ourselves. I mean, we always knew we were nerds and geeks because we'd all been gaming for years and years and years, and we knew how few of us gamed in that. And that's why D&D was aimed at miniatures players, because nobody else was used to handling figures. You know, I mean, there was a reason why we geared it at miniatures players. And we realized that because we'd both begun to hear stories from people coming up to us at cons about what the trouble had kept them out of one summer, or I was a poor reader, but I wanted to read those books so hard. And I'm still hearing those stories 40 years later. I get them in my Facebook feed every day almost. And I get them in my YouTube a lot now. The guy that was dyslexic and worked him out in 2 summers, worked himself through dyslexia so that he could read all his brother's fancy dragon books, which his parents said he could do after he achieved a certain proficiency. And he said from that point on, while he didn't love reading, he certainly enjoyed it. You know, a kid came up to me 3 years ago at Gen Con. I didn't crash, but I decided I'd attend the WotC party, who had invited all D&D people. I thought, well, shit, I'm a D&D people. So I went up and I was just standing around watching, didn't recognize a single goddamn person there. And this young man came up to me and saw my name tag, because it flipped back over, unfortunately. Because I usually go around with these guys, they're smart, they put it on both sides, you can't hide. He came up and he told me the story that when he was about 15 or 16, he was shy, he was ill at ease in public, and nervous around girls, And the only thing he did was get really good math and science grades. And then he played D&D one summer, all summer. And now, without bragging, he told me how he had more girlfriends or potential girlfriends than he ever thought one person could have at one time. He was fronting a rock band, singing and playing bass guitar, and was the vice president of his senior class. And he attributed it all to that magic summer when he came out of his shell with 4 or 5 of his other friends who were all, and Gary and I, we were picking up on that then. We knew that we had fundamentally changed psychology for geeks and nerds if they chose to go there. And I still, to this day, I lay my head in the pillow. I know we changed the world. Just like when I was in the second Hobbit movie halfway through and the battle was unfolding and every hair on my body stood up. I go, this is what we started. We cut down the first trees and pulled the first stumps and sowed that field and then watched it fits and spurts go places. So about then we knew something special was happening. Of course, sales were taking off like a rocket. The Dallas Egbert thing was the biggest sales boost anybody could ever have hoped for with a phony PR stunt or something. Oh, it's horrible? Well, I gotta have one, The printer couldn't keep up with it. So we knew at that point in time that there was a morbid fascination that would, some fade away, but some would grow. We spent a lot of time throwing seeds out, helping other guys along the way. The Dragon magazine never once printed a single column inch of anything negative. I never showed bad figures and said they sucked. I never published anything about a game, don't waste your money. I thought there were so many fun things to do out there that my job was to show you as many fun things as you could do. And from the day we started the magazine, Gary and I had the philosophy we would take anybody's ads because, hey, we'll take your money, it's all green. And we would not waste time with that. These are what I told him. And as a publisher, he said, okay, sure, it's yours, whatever. And the rising tide would lift all boats. As all these companies we were advertising, and they were selling games, and they were becoming more popular, and they were showing up at the cons, we really felt we grew the fantasy and science fiction hobby from nothing. And I don't think we're too cocky to still feel that way. Mark Miller and Traveler, great product at a great time. He got people into science fiction that might not have otherwise. But with the Dragon, we tried to expose as many people as possible to as many interesting games as we could. And we figured that the more they get excited, they'll turn their friends onto it. And D&D was the original viral marketing. Before that became an internet term. I went to Carbondale, from Carbondale to Lake Geneva in the summer of '74 and bought the brown box and 3 and a set of dice. That's all the money I had with me. Didn't realize there was going to be so much gas getting up there. And I didn't have a room, and I was just going to drive back that night. So I drove back to my college, and I ended up infecting 18 other people, who then, when they left college, went and infected 2 or 3 or more, because I had the opportunity of being first with my whole game club. They would go home. And so we sold mostly to college students and really bright high school kids in the very, very first 2-3 years. That was our market. It wasn't a general market thing yet. It wasn't a mom and pop game thing yet, though a lot of companies started coming out with stuff wisely that could be mom and pop, and some of the evolutionary card games and stuff were hilarious. We like to play games at Lake Geneva. And if one of us on the magazine liked that game, one of us was me at first, but then later when Kim and Jake and the other people came in, we liked it, we talked about it, okay, let's talk it, let's tell other people about it. We did weird shit like statistically analyzing Monopoly board for the return on your money for each of the properties. That was Gary's idea. Totally ruined Monopoly for me. Totally ruined it. He took Rail Baron, I think, and statistically analyzed that. and just it destroyed me. You know, he analyzed all the routes and the ones that paid best. But that's the kind of gamer he was. He was a min-maxer before there were min-maxers, and then when he got a new game, he analyzed it as though he were going to deconstruct it or design it himself. So I published those because I found them interesting. Years later, I kind of regretted it. But at the time, I found it interesting because we were just trying to turn people on to games. Turn them on to games. As many people as possible, turn them on to games. You know, hey, aren't these fun? Because we knew that we were all going to do well. And at very first, ill-kept secret, GAMA, the Game Association, Game Manufacturing Association, anyway, they were formed to compete against TSR because TSR started to dominate sales at the conventions to such a point that one company is pulling in 45% of all the revenue. And when there's 12, 14 other guys there, they're fighting over 50% between them. Wow, I got 2.5% each. So GAMA was formed, and at first they wouldn't let us in. No reason given, just no every time we applied. Because we were doing that, and eventually we became so big that we, to GAMA. That's how Origin started. Origin was begun because the East Coast board game companies wanted to have a convention of their own that wouldn't be full of all those dragon people. So we went to Origins the first year and we sold out our entire stock. So that didn't work either. So there was all these obstacles that were thrown in our path, many with very mean spirits intended, and we just laughed and ran over them and didn't even bother to look back in the mirror. When you have a product that is solid and you have faith in your product, you don't let that crap bother you. And we had solid faith in our product and on what we were doing. We were apostles of role play, apostles of adventure gaming. And I'm proud of that. I'm proud of what it's done for you. You know, all of you that play or have thought to play or played once or twice. You know how tough it is to go to, be at lunch with the buddies from work and explain what you did all last night out there killing hobgoblins and chasing witches and shit. But that's only because they don't understand any more than you understand why he spends all night sitting down in the basement turning out 40 perfect bullets. Okay, if it's not your thing, you don't understand it. So I think we're much less likely to be laughed at now and sneered at than we used to. I'm very glad to see that. I'll tell you a story. I guess 6 or 7 was the first Gen Con I went back to and came out of obscurity. And there were some funny stories about why I dropped out of sight and things that had happened to me, none of which were true. And I was driving into Indianapolis. I live in Cincinnati. It's about a 95-minute drive into Indy. And so I was driving into Indy coming in from the east on Southeastern Avenue. I started seeing these little flags hanging from the streetlights. Well, and I immediately had this Dorothy-like, you're not in Kansas anymore. Because when we had Gen Cons in Lake Geneva, all the people that lived there would leave that weekend because thought they were being overrun by weirdos. And I started seeing women and girls and boys and children, which is something I never had in the 20 years between when I dropped out of gaming and when I came back in. And I was so overwhelmed to see that now we truly are a family activity. And that was my apotheosis when I drove in that year. Oh, okay, this is cool. And I thought to myself, and Gen Con's something that we started. It's been here all these years. Okay, I'm good with that. Like a lot of people in the industry, I don't run around reminding people what I did. If they're smart enough to know, that's fine. If they aren't, I don't care. It's fine. I'm just a gamer at the guns. Just that clown at the end of the table. And I'm okay with that. I know what I did. Immortality, we were talking about that last night. Somebody said, oh, you'll be immortal for your contributions. Maybe, maybe not. But I will be immortal. I used to have a micro armor collection of over 4,400 AFVs. That's not counting the trailers and the guns. I mean, both CNC and GHQ thought that it was probably the largest personal collection in the United States at the time. And I had that for years, and I had a sand table, and then I had to give up the sand table, so they sat, and I had 6 of those cabinets with all the screw drawers in it. 6 of those were stuffed full of tanks. So I decided I would do something good with them, so I donated them to the George S. Patton Memorial Museum in Point Chiriaco, California. And they gave me a $2,000 thanks for this, tax write-off thing. But they're redesigning a wing, part of a wing, and using all this to do some battles. And outside the door of that thing, there will be a brass plaque about how I made that possible. That is immortality. Your name on a plaque in a museum. That means more to me than all the rest. Not that the rest doesn't mean a lot, but that, being an ex-teacher, that plaque over the door, and they'll go, Tim Cass, who the hell is he? I don't care. Every time they say my name, I remain immortal. And that's what I look for, in my own weird way. Questions. I saw another one come up over here. I probably rambled right past it.
Well, I didn't have my hand up before, but I will ask, do you want to talk about the separation and return?
Well, the separation from TSR was, I was the first on the Bloom Brothers shit list, and I didn't know until several years later that at the point I was let go, they had just achieved majority owning, and they were able to force me out the door. For several years, I had the swing vote between the Gygaxes and the Blooms. And so I more often than not came down with Gary because it was usually creative. And of course, I had a well-known blowout with Kevin's wife. And so I was the first to be pushed out the door. And then I got an offer in Cincinnati to come start up a new magazine. And I moved my family down there. They paid my moving expenses and everything. And this was the early 80s, and I did 13 issues of Adventure Gaming Magazine. Very proud of it. And I had to close the door when I was about $6,000 in the hole out of my pocket. I was making money every issue on paper, but Reaganomics was just beginning to fail. If you go back and look over that 4-year period, about 70% of all the small mom and pop businesses across America died. And a heavy proportion of them were hobby shops and toy stores, which is where I was at. And so I'd get 60 new 60 new distribution, and I'd lose 110. And the one I'm getting 60 on ends up going bankrupt, and I get 30 cents on the dollar over a 6-year period. So I get 5 cents a year. So I couldn't do it anymore. The base, only the TSR and the Wizards had the distribution base to make a magazine truly successful. And that's only because they had deep pockets to get it rolling. Now, I'm extremely pleased to have been involved with Gygax magazine and Luke and Ernie. And if the bitch loses her lawsuit, which we're all rooting for, we're hoping that she loses all of those, and we will start a new magazine the day that happens. If I'm alive, I will be there just like I was before, the contributing and coordinating editor. I still like it, but to be honest, print media is dying. In the future, if there's still a gaming magazine, it's going to be $18, like old military, old MHQ used to be. It's going to be a ton of money, and it's only going to be able to afford to come out 4 times or 5 times a year. And it's not going to be that monthly thrill of opening that magazine and smelling that ink. And most newspapers are dying now. The rag we have at home is a piece of garbage. And I quit because I was tired of paying the ridiculous monthly fee. And so what happens, Groupon gives me a price for 6 months, less than 2 months of their price. So I'll read the newspaper at that price. But it wasn't worth what they're charging themselves. It's tiny, and half of it's USA Today because they're getting it. And print media is dying. I just did Jay Libby is a man on the East Coast that has dilly green beans, and he does a lot of writing for other people out there, and he's published a lot of superhero games and stuff, role playing. And he had me do a Skype with his class of young journalists at the junior college. He teaches that. And I told him flat out, I said, don't expect to be able to get out in 2-3 years from now and find a job in print media. I said, the only way you're going to do that is find what's left in that amount of time, and in the meantime, you're going to have bona fides. You're going to have stuff that you've blogged, that you've vlogged, that they can go to and see your style, because there aren't enough openings for anybody to take a chance on anybody nowadays. And most magazines are gone. Look at the magazine rack today. What do you see? Home improvement, cooking, cats and dogs, birds and flowers, Cosmopolitan, Red Book. Most of there's even not as many truck and gun magazines as there used to be. You know, you just look at, and the Kroger News, the Kroger magazine rack, when I first started going to that thing, was almost as wide as this room. Now we're looking, it's this wide. There's just not enough magazines to put on it. So I told them, don't go to print media. If you're going to go to newspapers, go to a big store, go to a big city with a big one, and learn how to write features that catch somebody's eye. Otherwise, go electronic, go digital. That's going to be it. News is going to come digitally. I didn't want to bum them out. I told them I'm a journalist at heart. I have a degree in journalism, but to be realistic and real honest with you, this is where I think you need to look, because magazines are dying. And I told them, the magazines I've been involved with over the years, and how none of them could be supported today. So I'm going to shine them on. They enjoyed the class. Jay loved me for it. So, I just told them truth. Truth, yes. Oh, I thought you were, oh, okay. Okay, that was just an affirmation, okay. You got to go to your class. I can see you have your pencils in your hand. You got to go to your event.
They're sticking me in the side. So.
Oh, is that all? Oh, okay. I thought you were getting ready to bolt out the door.
Nah.
Okay, that's okay if you do, Edwin. No, it's okay if you do, Edwin. Questions?
Well, about the return, that was actually, so that was the.
Oh, why'd I return? Frank Menser found me. I was selling textbooks from when I was getting my master's in the early 2000s. And he saw my name on a textbook on half-price books. It was the old one that eBay's now eaten. Yeah, it was half-price. There was half-price something that's now part of eBay. And they specialized in used books and tapes or CDs, whatever. And anyway, I was trying to sell some old books. And so he made it I think he might have called me up or whatever. They had gotten a hold of me through, it was half price. Anyway, he got a hold of me and said, are you that Tim Kask? And I said, yes, I am. And so he, it's kind of like the way I called up Gary out of the blue. And he said that and at this point in time, I was getting ready to unload all my old D&D stuff because I was done with it. And he said, well, why don't you come to Gen Con with me? I'm an auctioneer there. And we'll talk about all this. And so he conned me into going, and this is back when the auction was staying out in the Baghdad Hilton by the airport, the cinder block rooms. And we talked, and I worked the auction a little bit that year, and I was terrible at it. And I wasn't really interested in doing grunt work, because that wasn't why I came, and I didn't feel I should. And I never did do grunt work. But anyway, I kind of enjoyed it, and the next year I came back and I got better at it. And I came back the third year, and by this time I was writing adventures at the cons I was going to, doing 10 copies at a time, putting a comb binding in them, printing them up myself using, at the time I was just using Word, and selling them for $300 a pop as numbered collector's editions. And I had a steady supply of people waiting to buy them. And so that was kind of interesting. That spurred me. What really brought me back just before Frank got a hold of me was a video game called Age of Wonders. I played the first iteration, and I enjoyed it, and then I saw a second one come out. And in it had a scenario editor, completely open source. You could build your own, they call them maps, we'd call them, gamers, scenarios. You could build your own. You could set up traps. You could set up goodies. You could set up bad things to happen. You could put monsters in it. build what you want and paint these enormously gorgeous maps that must have been megapixels in size. And so I got involved with that, and it was kind of fun to play. And then I started chatting with a couple of people, and one of the guys that was going to convert one of the big mods. The thing about this game was you could play the Glorantha mod, and you would be in Red Bear, White Moon, Glorantha, Chaosium's world. The soldiers would look like the uniforms they're supposed to. It had several of these mods. And they were all, that's why everybody loved the game, and it was an orphan for 6 years, and the public kept it alive, and it kept it alive long enough to be bought again. And so I found I had a knack. He wanted to know if I could write up some bad guys. And I said, well, I don't know. Send me the sprites, just the picture of what he looks like. So he sent me the sprites. He sent me 6 of them. About 50 minutes later, I sent him back with descriptions on all of them. He goes, how'd you do that? I said, well, when I looked at them, I just kind of knew who they were. And I did. So I must have done 100 sprite descriptions in that mod. And it just started rolling. And that's when I started writing the adventures. I had a chance, and Frank told me, you could write up adventures and sell them. Oh, yeah, okay. And so that's where it started. But it all started with a video game that had an editor that I saw the possibilities of creating scenarios. And so I realized I'd always been an editor, and editing is a job that doesn't allow a lot of creativity to creep in. I always prided myself on even if I did a heavy edit on a piece, if I did a heavy edit on a piece, it's because the general core thinking in the piece was worth it. And if I did it well, the guy that wrote it never knew that I'd done it. He just, damn, I did write that good. Because I always kept it in the author's voice. Never put it in mine. Never went into High Gygaxian if they weren't writing High Gygaxian, that kind of stuff. I think that's the biggest job an editor has, is to keep the author's voice in the writing, and you can make it better, but you can still, I wouldn't put in a word that would make a lot of people look it up if this person doesn't use words that make a lot of people look it up. I wouldn't do that, So I think that's the best an editor can be, is keep it in the voice. I went and we did Gygax, then the bitch ran us out of business. She's now been sued for $30 million, so somebody's finally caught up with her. We still don't know where the almost $500,000 for the fund went. She's not ever accounted for that. And that's where we find ourselves with Gary's legacy today. But his game goes on. I know he's up there at a game table somewhere. Wouldn't that be a game table to play at? Because just everybody would want to play there. Back in the early 70s, PBS had a program that Steve Allen hosted. And if you can find kinescopes or any of these things, I urge you. It was called Meeting of the Minds. He played a host, and he'd have 3 or 4 historical personalities in costume and character, and they'd all sit down to the table together. Some of the best writing I have ever seen. There's not been a lot better since. Meeting of the Minds. That's what I think Gary's table looks like. He can have anybody he wants. And some of us have often speculated, who would he get to his table? But that's if you believe in that. It's almost 5 o'clock. You have no more questions? Yeah, okay.
You started Dragon Magazine.
Yeah.
And then White Dwarf came out in the UK. What was your opinion of White Dwarf?
My opinion of most of the British stuff that was done earlier was an awful lot of it was Monty Python silly. Now, why I like Monty Python, I don't put Monty Python in my games. White Dwarf fit their market much better than I could because they knew what Brits wanted to read about. They didn't compete with me. I still sold copies over there. I was their importer for a year and a half. I was their agent in the United States. Once again, the rising tide lifts all boats. And we were very much about the rising tide. And I think the Fiend Folio is full of some of the silliest crap I have ever seen in my life. It's like, how screwy of something can I make up? Maybe some of them pertain to English myths and boogeymen and stuff that I don't understand. I absolutely admit that possibility. But what is this thing called a flump or a plump or some marshmallow thing that goes around and swallows your head? And oh, come on, you know, scare me. Don't make me try to laugh to death. Scare me. Isn't this why we're here, to challenge ourselves and not fight marshmallow clouds? They had several other things I thought were... It's just like they tried to outdo us. Make it screechier, or the limbs longer and creepier, or give the spiders an extra joint in their leg, you know. That's really the way it struck me. I kind of disdained a lot of that stuff, and I still do to a point. But we were so focused on what we were doing, you know. I think the biggest mistake Gary and Brian made was not suing Tunnels and Trolls out of business, because they were an absolute copy. But they said no, and they let them go long enough to where they couldn't. And that's the only reason Tunnels and Trolls is still out there today, because Gary and Brian weren't smart enough to understand what a threat they posed. Tunnels and Trolls never sent me an article. They probably figured they didn't want to attract Gary or Brian's attention. But everybody else, you know, the knockoffs, the homages, I'm fine with that. They all have basically gotten around the ridiculous rules that WotC set down about what you can use and what you can't use. Oddly enough, there's 3 lists that they have published of monsters that they claim sole and total ownership of. And my boulet is not in any of them. So I still use my boulet as I wish, and they can suck it. All right, let's see how this worked. I hope. I don't know. What do I press to stop it? This? No, that took a picture.
It should be 9 minutes.
It's still running.
Maybe this or the stop is square.